Onion Cycles podcast is about thought provoking, emotion evoking, action driven, step by step guidance to explore the unique, glorious, and wonderful ocean of your being. Because healing is a multi layered process of getting to know oneself. Become the self empowered empiric researcher by discovering the unique layers of your existence. With your host, Nadine Alma, welcome to the Holistic Healing Hub. Welcome to the Onion Cycles podcast. Hello, my beloved fellow healing integrating onions. Welcome back to this episode, to the last part of this Being Human series. I really can't believe that it's already 2.5 months that we spent on this topic, but to be honest, I feel like it's probably one of the major series I wanted to bring out there because, as I've mentioned in the very first part of this series, this is the blueprint of what it means to be human, and this, to me personally, is such a beautiful, graceful way to navigate what it means to be a divine being, but also a human being. So, with all my heart, welcome back to this place of vulnerability where we are self empiric researchers out there curious to find out who we are, get to know the mosaic that is us, and from there have a point to realize what do we want to keep, what do we want to discard, and thrive in our existence. To everyone new out there, a warm welcome to you as well. I wanted to put this disclaimer right at the beginning. Every one of our podcast episodes contains a information based but mostly action based approach. So we transpire, we thrive through integrating the motto, the credo, as I think, so I feel, so I act. So every episode comes with a worksheet that contains all the notes of what we have discussed, as well as actions, exercises, and things that make this experience as individual, as personal, as intimate as possible, because we are all different. No one is the same as the other. Every perception is different. So, in order for this to really become a healing experience, to have this support system of talking about all of the topics that we talk about, we really need to dig deep and make it as personal as possible. So these exercises that I suggest you do, that I do myself, are there just because it is very important to dive deep into the ocean that is you, that is yourself, and then from there work your own way through your own perception, through your own experience of your human experience. So now that we're here, I present to you Story 31, Episode 32, the Being Human series outro. We have spent 2.5 months on this topic. We now, hopefully, we know that the majority of what we discussed comes from Mary Magdalene Revealed, the book by Meggan Watterson. And today I just wanted to close this series by some very personal thoughts on this journey, because I feel like just ending it with the last power and then just leaving that be wouldn't do them justice in a way that I feel the importance of them. So I want to underline that to me this was mind-blowing. This was absolutely one of the most life-changing experiences. I think it's in the top 3 of gratitude practice and breathing exercises. So it was quite intense for me. That's why I said I read the book 2 times, and then I decided I need to scrap all of the program I had planned and just go for this one. Some general thoughts to the topic itself, to me, that were the most powerful, felt the most powerful, is for one, the yin and yang balance that comes up within all of those powers. So it's like the power itself is never dangerous, never bad, or should never be unwanted, but it's the imbalance of it and the absence of the awareness that there is a soul too. It's not just a human experience. So I feel like that the realization that we are a soul as well, and not just this meat suit filled with blood and chromosomes that make up our DNA. We are more than that. We also have energetic bodies, and all of them are sort of interconnected with each other. If you're interested, I also did a series called the Four Bodies series. If you want to listen into the Four Bodies series, I will link the first episode, which is the physical body, underneath here and up there or wherever you see it, because it's quite lovely to understand this about ourselves, especially if we do this very important self-empiric research of why things happen to us and what is going on in the metaphysical as well when those things happen. Now, the second general thing I wanted to throw into the pot of conversation is the interconnectedness again. So the interconnectedness of the bodies is very specific, but the interconnectedness of all those 7 powers, I feel like, is also very important to carve out for us to understand. Interconnectedness makes it so hard to distinguish between them, because for me personally, when I worked through all of these powers, I felt like, oh well, darkness also sort of slowly bleeds into desire, and there's an interaction between them when it comes to a day-to-day experience of those powers in my daily life, right? And then I have also this interconnectedness of the realm of the flesh, the seal for death, and the foolish wisdom of the flesh, that are sort of all, yeah, like if you ever drawn with watercolors, I see the visual for myself as a blank canvas. That's me. And then I have all of those watercolors that sort of merge into each other and are, depending on how you hold the paper, they also go in different directions and express themselves differently. So the interconnectedness of all of those powers, which makes it then somehow very hard to distinguish where the origin of what ails us comes from, right? It highlights the point that it's all about being mindful and being intentional, and yeah, like sort of not give ourselves too much into them, but trying to see it from the objective point of view, from the bird's eye view. Because if you're in the moment and you have this feeling and you work through those feelings, you feel those feelings, you transmute those feelings, you find out where they come from, and then most of the time, or there's also a quote saying that if life was lived backwards, it would be so easy to understand and make the right quote unquote decisions, right? So I feel like in the moment sometimes it's very hard to detach, but overall, when I see this interconnectedness, I feel like it's even more important to be intentional with whatever comes up and try to make space and time for it, right? So those are the general points of view, like having the balance between realizing we're soul and a body, the interconnectedness of all of them, which makes it sometimes hard to distinguish what really ails us, where the root of all that ails us is, and then also the being mindful, being intentional, being aware, and being curious about finding out and then transmuting and thriving on that concept of, yeah, this is life and I want to live it to the fullest. And if there wasn't anything but happiness, then we wouldn't even know what happiness was, which brings me to the first power, darkness, right? So as someone who sort of for the majority of her life has suffered, quote unquote, from depression and darkness within and around her, I feel like I have now a new perception of darkness. The most important thing that I take away from this first power is reframing it. So whenever I encountered darkness, or like this dragging, this numbness, this coldness, this feeling alone, everything dark in my life since I read the books, I came to the realization that I actually, most of the time, came to terms with being okay with it, almost appreciating it. Like the longer it drags, the harder it gets. But then also in the beginning, I sensed that it felt so much more easy to welcome this one as a friend and say, all right, okay, I realize there's something going on, and we are now going into stillness, we're now going into silence, into maybe coldness or maybe not, but we are trying to reframe darkness as something that's essentially good, and then it depends on what we do with it and how we approach it, and heal from there. I feel like it's a very good analogy or a metaphor to say that darkness to me is represented by a wound that is not addressed and hidden, and we don't want to look at it. So the moment we do that, obviously, if we don't tend to it, it festers and it becomes very nasty. It becomes more painful. It might just spread all over the body, and we have a huge issue afterwards because we didn't address it, right? Versus if we go into it and then say, okay, I feel this pain, I feel whatever emotion comes up connected to the situation, the person, whatever, to myself, and then I try to acknowledge it and just be with it for a while and accept that as a human, as this blueprint of being a human, that happens. We are fragile humans, we are not enlightened, and we are trying to have these experiences, and the more we interact with the experience and be intentional again and be mindful again, then the more we can see these powers, and especially for me, darkness, as a friend that shows us something that might feel painful, might feel sad, but eventually in the long term, if addressed, if tended to, if given the right care, kindness, and compassion, then out of there can evolve a healed, integrated, bigger part that before was maybe smaller. So I made the experience, the more I go into the healing, integrating approach and not shy away from really being curious and also self-empiric with how it could be healed for me, how I could address it, what tool works and what not, I sort of get whole. And by getting whole, I feel bigger in the sense of I have more to offer to myself, to others, to the world. So yeah, darkness was a huge part, and I feel like reframing it as something positive, as connecting it to the womb, to where everything is born, it sort of makes a lot more sense on how or why it is in our life, why it is so valuable. And if you feel like that too, or if you have other thoughts, please don't be shy. I always say, sharing is caring. Maybe there's someone out there who really needs to read what you have to say in order for them to integrate, in order for them to not feel alone or misunderstood, in order for them to feel heard, feel seen. And that is the beauty of being a human. It's like the connection between each one of us. So don't be shy, share your thoughts on everything you feel like is valuable to yourself and to other people. And if you feel the desire, which is a nice bridge right now, go ahead and make a comment. So the second power was desire, was the most difficult for me to understand at first, and still is now. Like, I don't think I'm at 100% of really feeling the experience of why desire is a power of wrath, right? So I feel like at first, I was like, well, but if I want to do a podcast and I just do it, then it's a desire that I fulfill. And then I sort of started thinking on when desire was a problem or felt like a problem, a hardship in my life. And that was every time something was out of my control. Because with the podcast, it's easy. Like, I sit down, I do my research, it's topics that interest me, that have sort of evoke a drive within me, a passion, and then I go after it and I can produce it myself. I don't have to wait for anyone else. I don't have to co-work or arrange something with someone else. And then as soon as I lose control and it's something in the external that I want to get, then the hardship comes in, and then desire sort of attaches itself to the saying that, well, if I get this and or am that, then I can be happy. So I understood from reading the book and from the experience in my life at this moment right now is that as soon as the attachment comes in, the desire becomes a power, right? And from that mindset on, I felt like, all right, but I always say change is the only constant in life. So how about I scrap out the if then concept and try to, as soon as I have this desire, go more with the flow. Like, I can do everything I want to do into that direction to bring me closer to that goal. It's not bad to have desire. Part of our society says that we are sinful, or there is such a thing as sin. But what I took away from the power and the book overall was that there is really no such thing as sin. We as humans can make it into a sin, but basically it's just an unintentional imbalance, and we let us be dragged away by the human part, when in fact the soul part, the divine part, is what helps us make the balance and stay in balance and look at it from a more objective, not entangled point of view, right? It's a matter of not attaching yourself to the outcome of sorts, is what I'm trying to say with this long description. Which brings me to ignorance. So I sort of have it renamed in my mind as lifting the veil. I feel like, to me personally, it comes down to Sonder. We discussed Sonder in a very early episode. Sonder is the meaning of everyone around you having the same vivid experience and perception and dreams and goals and visions and hardships and challenges that life presents, right? So every one of us has this same vivid perception of life that we live, right? So if we apply Sonder towards ourselves and others, then this sort of feels like a lot like lifting the veil, like making sure that you address and hold your boundaries while also being very aware, kind, and compassionate towards other people's boundaries. And that sort of feels like the antidote is to be curious and intentional, because ultimately ignorance creates a wall, it creates disconnection, and staying in separation is very painful. Initially, each and every one of us needs people to survive. We are beings that strive for connection, that strive for oneness, for wholeness. So we have discussed that too, I think, in the Art of Love series. The most innermost strive of humans is to become one again, connected again, whole again. So ignorance is basically the antidote that makes separation and that makes us stay in a state of separation, and out of that is born the illusion that we are separate from others, we are separate from mother nature, we are separate, but we are not. So everything I create towards someone else and myself, I also experience in myself and others experience in them. And once this interconnectedness of beings, of everyone connected on this mother earth, right, comes into view, we then automatically take on the view of Sonde and then make steps away from that ignorance. And that said, I wanted to also make like a disclaimer here. Ignorance per se, as every power, isn't bad. Ignorance can also serve you for a while as a protection. I gave the example in the episode, I feel like, of an emotionally or physically abused child. If that child was aware that there is a life possible without that sort of abuse, or that this is not normal, coping with the situation would be so much harder. So I feel like the protection aspect of ignorance shouldn't be discarded too easily. And from there, we sort of slide into the fourth power, which is seal for death, which to me personally was one of the bigger ones as well. Like, as I said, no one of those powers is within each one of us in equal measure, right? So, seal for death, at first I thought, well, that is basically the story of my life. But then I got like reframed in that as well, because seal for life, understanding it as a not just a suicide of the physical body, but a unaware suicide, a unconscious suicide with all our actions. So feeling like, all right, I am not suicidal, but then going home and binge eating, binge watching, or doing everything to the extreme without balance and without care for our body to the topmost level is sort of like a seal for death. I'm curious about your opinion, because I feel like this is just my perception on these powers, and there might be so much more valuable things, ideas, and perceptions, experiences out there. Every lack or too much of anything for me personally goes into that category, and having that reframed in that sense was really mind blowing and brought me a lot of new revelations and epiphanies. We then continued with the fifth power, which is the realm of the flesh. And here also the violation of body and reclaiming the body was a huge thing. So the statement that all bodies are interconnected, like all bodies, not just the physical body, but also your own emotional, your mental body, your spiritual body, came to mind while researching for this power, because I felt like, oh, well, that makes sense. The realm of the flesh, the physical body, and so much of our external distractions come from someone, some image, some society, some opinion saying that our body isn't enough the way it is and doesn't do enough of what it should do, which is absolutely wrong. And I feel like maybe this realm of the flesh could be an opportunity for us to be taught that, in fact, every shape that our bodies can take, the form that we are born into, the form that we operate with in this world, is so valuable from the very beginning. There is no fault with anybody because it breathes, it lives. You don't even have to tell it to heal. If you have a scrape, it heals itself. There's so much intuition, and there's so much beauty and wonder just connected with realizing what our body does for us on a day-to-day basis for, I don't know, the most part 50 to 80, 90, 100 years of a lifetime. the lungs, the heart, and all the intestines, and even like the microbes, the trillion of microbes that live in our gut. I mean, there's so much wisdom there. I'm getting ahead of myself to the sixth power now, which is the foolish wisdom of the flesh. But I feel like the realm of the flesh also bleeds into the foolish wisdom of the flesh in that very sense of stopping and appreciating the body for what it does for us, reconnecting with it, embracing it, listening to it, questioning it, like building a relationship as with every other power presented to us, because there's so much wisdom that saved within the chromosomes, saved within the blood, saved within the water. I can't really put into words how ashamed I felt when I realized how much of a scapegoat my body has been for the first 33 years of my life. I really am trying to make it up to my lovely body, and though it's hard, and there are days that it works better and days where it doesn't work as good as I would wish it to work, I know that this power did truly change something deep within me on how I approach my body and how I feel about my body and how I live my day-to-day life now that I have this in my awareness, which then is a neat description of the foolish wisdom of the flesh is awareness for the body. Because I have made that discovery that it's very easy for me to accept external change, and I strive for change. I like traveling and like trying new things. But as soon as it goes on to taking care of my internal world, meaning that after all of the outside experience that I take with me every day, focusing on the body and what the body might need, I overlook that quite a lot. Like if I have a day and I feel exhausted in my mind, I am very quick to say, oh, I'm too tired to do yoga or a meditation or a breathing exercise, when in fact, that would be just the perfect thing to do right now because my mind is exhausted, but my body hasn't been moved. So that is the most prominent example of what I observed while I was working on this power and on producing the episode and researching the episode, right? The wisdom that is there, but also how foolish it is to give in to the notion that our brain always wants the best for us and tells us exactly what it's supposed to have, when in fact the brain will always choose the easiest, most comfortable way, even if it causes pain, because that's the safest path. We know what's gonna go happen, we can cope with it, we have done it all our lives. And so choosing a different path and getting out of habits and patterns and stuff like that is so hard. And although I know now that there is wisdom and the body carries wisdom, I also go deep into the intuitive feeling and tap into my energetic bodies to sort of distinguish what is it that my brain wants, but what would serve me as a whole being, but also my body as this beautiful apparatus and magnificent machine that makes it possible for me to experience life and be here and produce this podcast episode, for example. So the seventh power, which we had last week, was the wisdom of the wrathful person and the compulsion of rage. My thoughts on that are quite minimal because, as I said, I've had my odd raging when I was in a relationship, and I had to sort of find a way to experience my rage and excuse myself for the rage that I showed to other people. But overall, in my life, rage had such a limited time period and existence that rage to me was a totally new topic in a sense. diving into the topic then and doing some research, the most interesting thing for me was first that there is a short term and a long term wrath and rage, and that realization that the short term rage, if addressed adequately and in the moment, and speaking up for myself and giving myself the voice back that I let be taken away, is actually healthy and expresses boundaries and expresses how I see my world, and that it's worthy, that I am worthy, that I address this and tell this to other people. So the short term expression of a violation of my own boundaries as a tool that makes it possible for me to be content and feel confidence is such a new one that I think I'm still processing, and I might continue to process for a while. And I still have to have this experience really felt on a daily basis. But talking about it and thinking about it and making connections to the past in my life, where the past situations in my life where I felt violated but didn't speak up because I turned myself, morphed myself to a people pleaser, right? That's still very helpful, but I feel like is still a journey to go as well. However, distinguishing between the short term and that the long term anger is mostly suppressed short term anger made so much sense, that I feel like from this lesson I can take away for quite some time and not even have fathomed the whole connection and the whole realm that is connected with this power and how it operated in my life, and how I now can come from a new approach of navigating it so that it isn't hurtful. Because, like that quote I gave you in that episode, it's okay to feel angry, it's not okay to spread it, by the comedian Hannah Gatsby. That is like another mantra that I will try to incorporate in my life, and I feel like will contribute to a overall more balanced and healthier way of being compassionate and kind to myself but also others. So yeah, it was a big topic. It was a big, long series. I do sincerely hope that everything we discussed and everything that was contained in these series, in these episodes, was of service to you, was contributing to your own growth, gave you new perceptions, gave you new insights about yourself, about people in your life, about how you approach things, and yeah, does what it was supposed to do. I do really hope that I was able to make these powers approachable, and that Mary Magdalene is happy with the result. And I do also hope that on your path of self discovery, of getting to know yourself, of working through issues, hardships, this serves you. That is of utmost importance to me. I really do want to be of service to you. And I will close this episode by saying that I'm deeply humbled that you're listening every week, that you're putting in the time, putting in the effort, putting in the energy to get to know yourself, that I am able to contribute something to this journey that is so personal and so intimate. I feel grateful for you being here, for you listening, and I want to sincerely say that you are the light. You are the soul of the earth. You are the light. You are also the darkness and everything in between. And I hope that getting to know yourself as this beautiful, wonderful mosaic, these fragments of personality, of emotions, of paradoxes, that you come to appreciate and love it because you are so needed. Everything you see, how you see it, your perception, and what you do with it, and how you interact on a daily basis, and what you create out of it is so needed in this crazy world that we live in this beautiful world that we live in this wonderful world that we live in. You are a wonder, and I thank you very much. I see you, I understand you, and I love you. And I wish you all the very best, my beloved fellow healing onions.